morning to all of you. Thank you very much for coming very early to, I hope, learn a little bit about the G8 and G20. First, I have two pieces of news to give to you, one bad, one good. So I start with the bad news. Bad news, I don't have PowerPoint. And the good news is that I don't have PowerPoint. Today, I would like to present the initiative and priorities of France's dual G20, G8 presidency, since it will head the two groups until the end of 2011. First, what are those groups? Those groups are informal groups of countries willing to increase their cooperation on different levels and topics. They are trying to generate a political momentum through political agreements. They need to be endorsed by the relevant organization. So they are not, I would like to stress that point, they are not international organizations. They do not produce international law. They are not a substitute to the UN or to the international community. The G20, a group of 20 advanced and emerging economies, was established in 1999 in the wake of the 1997 Asian financial crisis to promote global financial stability. But it was only in response to the global financial crisis of 2008, however, that the G20 emerged as a major player on the world stage, reflecting the change in the balance of world economic powers. Today, the G20 is recognized as the only international forum with the influence, authority, and ability to ensure that such a crisis never occurs again and provide world growth with more stable, sustainable foundations. The G20 summit in Pittsburgh in September 2009 marked a major step forward in the reform of global governance by designating the G20 as, and I quote, the premier forum for international economic cooperation. The G20 members represent some 85% of global GDP and two-thirds of the world's population. Confronted with the deepest economic and financial crisis since World War II, the G20 went into high gear in late 2008. At the initiative of the French Presidency of the European Union and the United States, the G20 met for the first time at the level of heads of state and government in Washington in autumn 2008. At this pioneering summit, the group agreed on an extraordinary plan of action to prevent the financial system and the global economy from collapsing. It was, in fact, the largest and most coordinated fiscal and monetary stimulus ever undertaken. The G20 also engaged in a long-term dialogue to resolve the dangerous imbalances that plague the global economy. It took shape with the establishment of a framework for strong, sustainable, and balanced growth. The G20 summit in Seoul in November 2010 focused mainly on exchange rates and global economic imbalances. A monitoring system is being set up to observe persistent economic disparities, and under the French chair, indicators to identify these imbalances will be developed. The G20 has demonstrated its capacity to meet its commitments, for example, with the prudential regulation of the banks, so-called Basel III, or the reform of the governance of the IMF. G20 action over the last 2 years has more than tripled the IMF's resources, and its governance was rebalanced in Seoul with the transfers of over 6% of the capital to the emerging and developing countries, more than the 5% target set by the G20 in Pittsburgh, and a new executive board on which the emerging countries have a full seat. G20 in Seoul took forward the action in support of fully responsible, better regulated capitalism. Members of the G20 were able to offer a collective and effective response that mitigated the impact of the crisis and restored confidence at a faster rate than many analysts had predicted. The world was pulled out of the financial crisis with a comprehensive package of measures, including budgetary and monetary aid, support for the banking sector, so it could continue to finance the global economy, protection of global trade, and a determination to safeguard the financial flows to emerging countries, particularly by giving a significant capital injection to international financial institutions. The call of protectionism was also resisted, proof that we had learned the lesson of the Great Depression 80 years before. So what are the G20 priorities for France? France is chairing the G20 from November 12, 2010 through to the next summit in Cannes in November 2011. Ministerial meetings, finance minister, agriculture minister, labor and employment minister, and most likely development ministers, and meeting of experts will prepare for the summit. A number of symposia and seminars will also be held throughout the year. President Sarkozy on January 24 said that our presidency's ambition is simple. We live in a new world, so we need new ideas. This new order is marked by, first, an extraordinary change in the balance of world economic powers. Second, a totally interdependent and increasingly volatile world where disparities have not only escalated quickly, but have also grown in magnitude. Third, global challenges such as climate change and development, which call for global and coordinated responses. President Sarkozy has set 6 priorities to the G20 under the French chair, confirmed by mandates decided on by the G20 in Seoul. First priority, coordinating economic policies and reducing global macroeconomic imbalances. The G20 is a key body for ensuring coordination of economic policies over both the short and longer term. Over and beyond its leadership during the crisis, the G20 has created the framework for strong, sustainable and balanced growth, whose goal is to redirect national economic strategies in a direction that provides greater benefit for the world economy. France will continue this effort in 2011 and will follow up on the commitments made in Seoul, whereby each member of the G20 agreed to implement measures tailored to national circumstances to reduce macroeconomic imbalances and boost global growth. Second priority, strengthening financial regulation. To strengthen financial sector oversight on a lasting basis, it is crucial that we ensure a thorough implementation of the rule agreed to by the G20. France will also work to stiffen the rules wherever they have proved missing, for example, with respect to regulation of the shadow banking system and concerning financial market integrity and transparency. Third priority, the reform of the international monetary system. In particular, to combat excess volatility in exchange rates and to improve the coordination of the economic policies of the major economic zones. In Seoul, the G20 mandated the IMF to work on, and I quote, a more stable and resilient international monetary system in the perspective of the Cannes summit later this year. We need to find a method and a forum for dialogue on exchange rate issues, as the G7 did in the past with the Plaza and Louvre agreement, to protect ourselves against massive capital inflows and outflows, to reduce the risk by diversifying the composition of currency reserves. Of course, it's a very sensitive issue that needs a lot of thorough thinking and discussion in light of the instability in currency exchange rates and the accumulation of unproductive reserves. A first seminar on the reform of the international monetary system will take place in China in March. Germany and Mexico will co-chair the working group. The fourth priority is commodity price volatility. At the September 2009 Pittsburgh summit, the G20 examined the issue of excessive fluctuations in commodity prices for the first time, but few concrete measures have been taken to date. France would like to find collective solutions in order to reduce excessive commodity price volatility, particularly of agricultural commodity prices, which undermines world growth and threatens food security for for populations around the world. The volatility that we are currently witnessing, 65% increase in wheat, the oil price bouncing from $40 to $140 per gallon in 6 months in 2008, must be addressed with pragmatism. We must also look at a better regulation and transparency of derivative markets in energy and other commodities. We cannot allow soaring food prices and wide swings in energy prices to threaten the lives of so many. We need to have greater transparency on commodity market trading and pricing. We'll propose setting up a joint database to improve the knowledge of production, consumption, and stock prospects, and further measures to exempt food aid from export restriction and build emergency stocks. The fifth priority is the reform of global governance. On the eve of the G20 summit, the first ever social summit will be held to discuss about a minimum standard of universal social protection. The environment is also a case in point. This area is addressed by many international organizations and institutions without any real coordination. The question of possibly establishing a G20 secretariat is also worth putting to improve work preparations and follow-up, even if there is yet no agreement over this. France will seek to support the G20 in its role as a premier economic cooperation body. France will also strive to foster more consistent economic cooperation, social and environmental cooperation. And we will try to identify areas in which this governance is inadequate. In particular, synergy between the G20 and the United Nations will have to be strengthened. Sixth, last priority, working on behalf of development. Today, the G20 is seen as an appropriate body for providing concrete solutions to development issues. The Seoul Summit in November 2010 represented a crucial milestone in this regard, with the adoption of the first G20 Action Plan on Development. In a world in which national economies and destinies are increasingly interdependent, it is essential to share the management of the planet among all the countries and peoples. We must cooperate to prepare a better future. This interdependence makes each country responsible for the development of its partners. During its presidency, France will seek to raise this priority higher on the agenda. In that context, the issue of innovative financing will be important, notably to meet the Millennium Development Goals and the Copenhagen climate commitments. You know that France is in favor of a tax on financial transactions. France will also take over the chair of the G8 has already taken over the chair of the G8 on January 1st. The summit of heads of state and government will be held in Deauville on May 26th and 27th of this year. Created in 1975 after the first oil shock at the Rambouillet summit, the G7 G8 is a forum of open, upfront discussions among leaders that form its strength. It will not address the same subject as the G20, but will complement its work in concentrating on other areas in which it can make a real difference. The new G8 will concentrate on 3 areas under the French presidency. First, challenges of common interest, such as the harmonious development of the Internet, access, protection, and economic aspect, and the new growth springboards, such as green growth and innovation. Second priority will be the peace and security track, which is a key element of the summit. In addition to political affairs, Iran, Middle East, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and non-proliferation, the President of the French Republic has proposed putting the issue of cocaine trafficking on the agenda, especially in the light of the new routes, Latin America, West Africa, Europe, and discussing countering terrorism, especially in the Sahel. Third priority is Africa. We'll take forward the exercise launched by the Kenyan chair on monitoring the G8 countries' commitments, especially in the areas of health and food security. In a spirit of mutual accountability with the African country, we need to improve the efficiency of our public aid. We will also address the issues of peace and security, especially the Sahel, and focus on building African capacities to deal with regional crises and the new common threats, particularly drug trafficking and the spread of terrorism. President Sarkozy was in Addis Ababa on January 30th to explain his agenda to the African Union. In conclusion, as the global economy is facing major challenges, the question is how to generate adequate levels of international cooperation to effectively tackle a range of shared problems and to define a new cooperative pattern for global governance. We know that these are complex issues that will not be solved in one presidency, but we hope to make a contribution in opening up the debate. And now I will myself like to open the debate, and I'm ready to answer, or to try to answer your questions. I'm very grateful to the Niagara Foundation for the invitation, because it provides me with the opportunity to talk a little bit about the G20 and the G8 French presidency. It's not an easy topic. It's very complicated, even sophisticated, but I think we need to raise a little bit the public awareness about the different issues which will be discussed at the top level.